All right, let's go ahead and get started today. Thank you everyone for joining. Good morning to all of my West Coasters like me, and happy midday to everyone on the East Coast. We are so excited that you're all here. Welcome to the State of Product and UX Trends and Insights that you need to know in 2021. My name is Emma Jordan, and I am a marketing manager at staffing and recruiting firm Motion Recruitment, who is the founder and creator of Tech in Motion events. So for those of you who might be new to Tech in Motion, maybe this is your first event, I did want to give you a little bit of history. Just a quick note on who we are. We have been around, this is actually our 10-year anniversary of Tech in Motion, and we have grown so much since we first began. And we are a community-driven tech event series with the goal to bring together the tech community all across North America so that we can all share ideas together and inspire one another and collaborate. So as we all know, advancements in technology and recent global events have brought a sudden change to the way we interact with the world, both digital and real. Today, we're going to take a closer look into how these changes have affected product and UX design and answer really important questions like, how will new trends and evolving user behaviors impact our digital products and the way people use them? And how can product managers, designers, and developers all come together to build better, more inclusive products and experiences in 2021? To answer these questions and many more, our event today will have 3 segments. First, you'll all get a chance to hear from Ted about the state of product and UX in his keynote opening. Next, you'll hear a panel discussion about current trends from our panelists who come from a variety of different backgrounds and industries, which will help give you a really holistic view into these key trends and insights. And last but not least, definitely don't skip out early and miss a real-world case study from product designer Nick Kuda. If you have any questions during the event, please submit them in your little Q&A box so that we can get them answered during our Q&A session at the end of the panel. So with all that to be said, let's go ahead and get kicked off. I would love to introduce you to our keynote speaker and our host for today, Ted, who is the head of design at Vanguard. Ted is a Philadelphia-based UX leader who's passionate about digital transformation in the financial industry and bringing accessible, well-crafted experiences to users. He manages UX teams focused on financial advice and design systems for Vanguard's clients. He loves a balance of design, research, content, and strategy, partnered with tech that makes a really powerful team. So Ted, I'm gonna go ahead and let you share your screen and you can take it from here.
Great, thanks, Emma. Let me just check this, make sure we're good. Can you all see my screen here?
Yep.
Excellent. So yeah, thanks so much. Really excited about today. I think we're gonna have some really good conversations with the panel. Super excited about the case study. Just want to take a few minutes and touch on some key things that I've seen and I've talked with my peers and the UX community about at Vanguard and some other Philadelphia area contacts as well. But first of all, happy spring. Those of us in the Northeast, I mean, this is a welcome change. The warm weather is certainly something that I'm looking forward to. Thanks to Motion Recruitment, and make sure that everyone on the line today, let's try to make this an open dialogue. We have some great questions that we'll dig into, but we'll do our best to keep an eye on the chat as well to make sure we can jump in with any other really interesting topics. And just to let you know, it is NBA deadline trade day, so like a lot of different things competing for my for my thoughts right now, but I'll do my best. So kind of like I said, one of a few topics I'm just going to touch on really quickly. Working remotely has been such a huge thing this year, and I think it's going okay, but it's definitely like a topic as far as UX leaders across my company and in my industry, and how we're thinking about some of the compromises that come with it. Things like, the human to human working relationships. I'm a fiend for whiteboarding. I really miss that. And just the casual conversations and check-ins that we have with each other. And then finally, I think a big thing is the emotional connection and the reaction to the work at hand. Really difficult to try to get the nuances of like a design critique over Zoom or Teams, but I think we're doing as best we can, and we've learned to accomplish a lot in the year plus that we've moved into this space. One last thing I mentioned here is no co-location. So the big trend with UX teams that I've seen that we practice at Vanguard is co-locating UX and tech and product. That's become sort of like something we champion ourselves on and a really winning ingredient. So trying to overcome that through a digital space has been challenging. But I think it's, weathering the storm is something that we will continue to retro over time. And I think we'll get better and better at it, even as we sort of come up with some back to the office planning later in the year. And certainly what comes along with this is the concept of burnout. This has been a huge topic within our UX space, and trying to make sure that our teams have the right balance for work and life, and that their mental health is top of mind for us. So really trying to go out of our way to make sure that people feel like they're in the right safe space to do their jobs. Second thing, and this is probably pretty obvious, but the idea of living digitally is probably going to come across in a lot of our conversations today, and certainly in the case study at the end of the day. But in the financial space, it can be incredibly difficult as we deal with like a lot of legal and compliance, heavily regulated space. But in the past few years, we've really honed in on this concept. And when we're thinking digitally and about digital platforms, we're trying to think, for us at Vanguard, beyond our competitors in the financial space, and really try to look at what are those best in class brands. Because we know for me, a typical Vanguard client probably interacts with about 12 to 15 brands in a digital space before they even think about logging in to look at their accounts. So what are we competing with as far as like a superior client experience? We always think digital first and mobile first, but more importantly, we always want to have like a North Star product vision. And to double click into that for a minute, we've seen like with IBM Design Camp and a lot of other companies, the idea of just solving holistic problems takes a really holistic approach. And for me, product design means the combination of those UX disciplines that I have on my team, which is UX research, UX strategy, UX design, and content strategy, and that really healthy relationship with our product. And if we come together like Voltron, nothing can stop us. At Vanguard, we truly believe like UX strategy just means being obsessed with the problem and taking that user-centered approach and converting hypothesis and belief into something that is validated through research and data. I know, like, as a UX leader, one thing that I love to see is a designer who understands and leans into those other UX roles to see how research and data can help inform those creative decisions and those UX decisions. And I think through that holistic approach, we learn to not just build things, but build the right things. So suss out what the right appetite is and really dig into the client pain point to solve the problems that they have. Because working with digital platforms, you take away the human component, you're truly at a disadvantage, and we have to utilize technology and product to get there. Third thing, and I won't go deep on this because I think we'll really dig into it with the panel, is accessibility. Like Emma said, like I run a design system team at Vanguard. I lead the design and strategy for that. And like other companies, we're really trying to get beyond the bolt-on or remediation approach to accessibility and really lead with it from the beginning. To do that, we have to rely on not just simulators, but we have to really engage with a panel of users that are highly engaged with us and that have a spectrum of disabilities and challenges that we can really dig into and understand what the challenges are as users. And that means that empathy is the key attribute to our design philosophy, and it really helps our approach to being truly human-centered. The last thing I'll touch on, it's more like a fun topic, is tools and tech. We have more choices than ever, and for an enterprise design team, like, we standardize tools and apps for the many, and then we pilot for the few. And there's so many out there, and there's some really good ones that allow us to use the tooling across teams and, balance what we want to standardize versus what we want to get into. Along that, in the same vein, we try to keep our Horizon 2 and 3 teams really healthy with their roadmaps. And so we use technology to look into like, okay, what does multivice and voice and AI and VR look like for a financial client? And we know some of those ideas won't go past those R&D sessions, but we have to keep looking at that and keeping those teams looking ahead to try and utilize new technologies that come about. Last thing I'll just say is that, we have a great panel today that represents some different areas and some different places within career pathing, whether we're freelance or consultants or in-house creative. But I think now's the time where we're seeing a lot of brands really invest in and trust in superior user experience and product design. So I think it's a really exciting time. And with that, I'll wrap up and just say thanks. And any burning questions, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but also feel free to engage on LinkedIn. And with that, I will pass it back to Emma, and we'll get started with some questions. There we go. Emma, do you have the questions to post up? Excellent. And let's go ahead and get started and introduce the panel. Nick, do you want to kick us off?
Of course, I'd love to break this silence. Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm super glad to be here. I'm Nick Kuda. I am a product designer at Inspire Clean Energy in Santa Monica. We have headquarters in Philadelphia as well. Yeah, previously to working at Inspire, I was at Faraday Future, which is an electric car startup. And yeah, I truly believe that just being a product designer means designing for good, right? Helping people solve problems and tasks and anything, and then letting them get on with their lives. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I can popcorn someone. Let's popcorn Rory.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Rory Waldinger. I'm a product design manager at Schneider Electric, based in Boston. I've had a long career path through UX. I started my career out of college at Anderson as a technology consultant, and then went over into the digital world at Razorfish, which was one of the larger digital agencies back a long time ago. And from there, I moved over to the client side, working at larger companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield and JP Morgan. And then I went actually for a number of years as a consultant. So I have, I've played on both sides in terms of being on the client side and the agency side. And both of them give you a great experience and background. So I think it's good to try to have, if you can, throughout your career, have a little bit of both. And now I'm at Schneider Electric with a team of designers, a global team of designers, and we work on one of the platforms within Schneider Electric.
I'll go from there. Hi, everyone. I'm Frankie. I'm super excited to be here with all of you. I can't wait to start this conversation with all the panelists. My intro will be a little shorter considering I'm still kind of just starting out my career in UX. I've been in the field full time since 2020, so really not long by any means. But I am currently a UX UI designer at a startup called Curastory here in New York. And I also, on the side, also work at a design agency as a mid-level UX designer. But before that was in college. So like I said, my career is quite short and just starting, but can't wait to see where it takes me with all of this, with all the exciting conversations and increases in technology and everything that's going on in the field of UX. So I will pass it back over to Ted.
Great, thanks. We've, I'm sorry, was there?
Right here.
There you go.
Let me do the last and then I'll pass it back to you. No, it's all good. Hey, I'm Avian. I am a UX consultant. My specialty is more on user research. I also do workshop facilitation and service design. I've been in the field for almost a decade now. And similar to Rory, I definitely agree with her where, I've been both on the agency side and client side. Now a consultant, and you definitely learn a lot of different processes, how to work with different types of people, what their expectations are. So I definitely agree, like it's really, if you can get into both sides, like I prefer client side over agency personally, but there are a lot of things that you'll learn on agency as well. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ted.
Awesome, thank you. So let's just dive into the first couple questions here that you see on the screen. How did you get into design? What does design in today's world mean to you? We can popcorn that, or like I can just jump in first and then just pass it along. I got into design. I was a visual design major at Tyler School of Art in Philly, and then got into agency life from there for about 20 years before landing in in-house creative at Vanguard. So similar to what Abian said, like getting that rounded view of everything, of whether it is freelance, agency, consultant, in-house, they're all very different. Obviously, provide your skill set within each one pretty consistently. But what I've seen is like with the larger groups, you get to sort of soak up like a sponge some of those other skills. And I've seen certain designers make the switch over to strategist or to research just because they got sort of exposed to some of those other tools in UX. So it's I think UX is a really cool space to be in. There's a roadmap for a lot of careers. Rory, I'll pass it over to you if you don't mind.
Sure. So like I talked about briefly in my intro, once I left more of the technology side and went over to the creative side, I knew kind of that's where I wanted to stay. So I started as more of a functional analyst. So, really kind of getting into use case development and business requirement development, which I also think is very helpful for a UX designer to understand that piece of how, just how the requirements and the use cases and the journey flows influence that has over obviously our experience that we create. And then from there, I continued down the path and, to a position now where I'm leading a team and trying to spend more time, communicating the value of UX and, influencing decision makers. Obviously, that's also a key role when you're at a manager level, and then obviously supporting my team and helping to advocate for them is also very important. So in terms of what does design mean to me, I think design is the perfect combination of human behavior and technology, right? So with technology, we try to define it down to a T. We write use cases, we write requirements, we code to, a pixel level, and then we try to map that with human behavior, which we have no control over. So it's kind of, this conundrum of trying to figure out the best way to merge those two worlds.
Awesome.
Oh, go for it, Nick.
Oh, I was just going to say, you go for it. All right, I'll go quick. I'll get it out of the way. How I got into design, I took a graphic design class in high school, which was honestly a little more of like, how can we keep these kids occupied by giving them access to Photoshop? So that was like my introduction, right? But I fell in love with design. I have an associate's degree in graphic design and a bachelor's as well. I started at a community college. But it wasn't until my time at Drexel that I really figured out that I wanted to stay on the more digital side of design, as opposed to going into traditional graphic design. And then I spent, my first 3 years outside of school in Philly at a larger design agency called EPAM Systems, which was an absolute great introduction into this. But yeah, so how I think about design today, I think I already mentioned it in my intro, so I got to work on that. But design for good, right? thinking about design and product design specifically as a way to help people find information or complete a task or solve some sort of problem. And then I like the products that kind of help people do that and then let them get on with their lives, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. Abian, how you feeling?
Gracias. Good. Thanks, Nick. All right. So for me, it's similar. I actually started as a graphic designer as well. What I think is really interesting is, I mean, I think we all had similar paths. So I started as a graphic designer, got into the agency life. I actually started at a graphic design studio, which was really awesome. But then I graduated during the recession. So at that point, everyone wanted web and they didn't really care for print. So I ended up going back to school and then learned digital, learned how to code. So I can speak to developers, but I am not a developer, is what I like to say. But what I think is really interesting about design from when I started, which was a long time ago, is as a designer, what I loved about graphic design is you can think about it as, you know, like taking these like different like visualizations and how do you communicate that to a certain group or demographic that you're trying to communicate that message to, which I love. And I used to think of it more as like, you know, it is a creative process, and I would just internalize what I actually created until, you know, I got into the work where it wasn't really about that. It was about the client brief, like what are the business objectives, and it's sort of like a hard reality from like school to like actually getting into the field. And I think it's really important, like with design, like it's still good to explore that creative process, but I think it's really important to remember that design is more of a tool. It's part of the whole process, and it's not like a standalone thing. Like I think it's really, really important to learn how to speak the business language in order to get your designs like to where they need to be. Like you need to get buy-in. And I think design really is about, and that's what I like about workshop facilitation or even service design. It's about thinking about the whole holistic experience. Everyone is actually involved in the design process. So how do you get people involved? And it's really about learning how to sell your ideas, how to talk to product managers, how to talk business. So that is what actually design means to me. It's past the creative. It's really about understanding how to work with people, getting the expectations right. I'll pass it over to Frankie.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not mute. Perfect. So I'm just going to follow the trend here as well. Since I went to school for graphic design, technically, that's what I call it, even though it was actually a degree in digital design at Tulane. And that was kind of a mix of graphic design, web design, and kind of all the above, whatever kind of fits within that. And so I fell in love with design and knew that I wanted to do something with that right away. But I knew that I wanted to go more into kind of the web space rather than the print space. And that's what got me to go into UX. And I did that actually through a boot camp, since that was a more recent aspect. And so to get to the second question of what design really means to me, I'd say it's problem solving in a creative way, honestly, is kind of what Nick was saying, is just being able to solve problems and doing that through, you know, aesthetics and design, and doing it in a way that's going to best fit the specific users. I'll pass it back off.
Awesome. Cool. So, I mean, biggest lessons learned as a designer in 2020. I saw one question in the chat around like, how do you build UX teams? I'll kind of direct it towards that way a little bit to start us off on this question. I think one of the biggest lessons learned for me is, one, building UX teams is hard. And for UX teams, we're talking like that, the 4 roles I mentioned before being design, strategy, research, and content. And I think you have to focus on the problem at hand. We, at my current role, like we underwent like a digital transformation, which is a gross, silly term, but we really rethought about how we build teams for the problems that we have. And we followed a blueprint of specific UX roles paired with development, paired with product. And after like 2 years of trying to scale that model, we realized that it can't be so much of a rubber stamp kind of solution, that you really have very specific nuances to design problems. And so we started to rethink about how we form teams. And we, you know, in some cases, we didn't need all of those roles together. In some cases, we might need to double down on research and strategy because there's so much discovery work to do. And in other teams, we might pull those roles out because we've got a healthy product roadmap and we're really just listening to the voice of the client and we're iterating through design and content and working that way. So I think that was the biggest lesson for me last year, was just that, like, there can't be such a consistent nature to how we build teams and tackle problems. So I will pass it off to whoever would like to go next.
I can jump into this one. For me, I'd say it's more from the freelance standpoint, I guess you could say. For me, so in 2020, I was freelancing a lot. And one of the biggest things I learned is that it's better, and I need to, moving forward, is to really align with my clients kind of what is UX and what is their definition of UX before even going into the projects. I found that, you know, I would start projects. Obviously, the client understood what I thought, at least I thought they understood what UX was. You know, they'd agreed to bring me on. But I get halfway through the project and figure out, well, you know, I have to build within a bootstrap template, or the client finally wants to actually take part in the research and really kind of, you know, decide that they want to take part in that whole project and actually be hands-on. And so for me, it was really kind of coming to my freelance projects now, anytime I start, with kind of a list of questions of like making sure that I can align with the client, saying, okay, this is what I am as a UX designer. I'm not an engineer. I'm not going to code. You know, I can use a website builder, but, you know, that's a whole other story. And just making sure that I understand what they expect from my position before really diving deeper into the project, because that happened way too many times for me. So that would be my answer. Who wants to go next?
Nice.
Ooh,
Yeah,
can
I
we do
jump
something controversial? Damn it, Nick, we and you are
No.
always fighting. We're
in.
scrapping it out.
Okay. No, you said controversial. Let's do it.
No, you go first. I
Oh my
cut you off last time. Do it.
goodness. This is great. I think one of my biggest lessons learned as a designer last year is the importance of, as a designer, understanding the perspective of your stakeholders just as much as understanding the perspective of your users, right? It's kind of our job to bridge the gap between business goals and user needs. So really being able to empathize with both and understand where they're coming from will make things that much easier. I find typically as designers, we sort of lean more towards the user side, which is kind of just natural. But yeah, just the importance of, you know, putting that work into building relationships with your stakeholders as well.
And I would say, just with that, Nick, I think last year in particular with COVID and reductions in staffing and all of the other challenges that came about with the last year, you're forced to push the priorities, right, with the stakeholders and say, okay, like, now we had a scope that was here, now it's here, and we have to figure out, along with our resources, and we have to figure out, like, how are we going to still be successful, right? Even with all of the challenges of the last year. So, you know, again, going back to your point about the stakeholder, if we want to be successful, we still have to be able to have that conversation and that negotiation with them.
Totally.
I definitely agree. So I'm gonna do two controversial conversations here because I'm looking at the chat as well. John, yes, we do need to lean towards user side. Stakeholders are definitely not the users, but in order to get buy-in, the stakeholders need to be involved. I kind of think of stakeholders, and as this is probably bad to say, is more like client management. Like, you need to manage their expectations. This is a new process to them, or maybe they read it somewhere on an HBR article, so they think they understand the concept, but they're not really embedded the way we are, right? So it's our job to make them aware of our process, hold their hand along the way. Cool. So you're cool with that. Just another one. Here's my first controversial conversation. And actually, I want to lean this back to Frankie, because Rajiv, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name properly, asked what is the difference between boot camp and a full-fledged 2-year master program. Rajiv, I am in the camp of like no school. I learned graphic design, you know, like, and then I fell into this role. I think it's really good to just be curious, open-minded, ask a lot of questions. I think it's the best approach, and like getting real life experiences versus like personally versus a boot camp, or like even school. Like when I got out of graphic design, I couldn't navigate into the field. It was really hard regardless of how you did it. Like I almost feel like an internship would be more beneficial than going to school. That is how I feel about school. You could tell I was never a straight A student, so I'm not a fan of it. And that is my controversy.
Can I chime in here for a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I am a boot camp grad, and I think boot camps are great. With that said, I totally agree with you 100%. And this is my pushback on boot camp, so I'll keep it short and sweet. But I do think they're missing that piece of, you know, not having that real world experience, you know, no internship aspect. Most of them don't, a few do. Mine did. But I do agree with you that I think it's best to really learn just by doing. That's how I've definitely learned the most. And so I just wanted to add that I 100% agree with you that the best thing you can do is just practice, practice, and practice, and doing that through, you know, asking friends and family if you can work on some projects with them, or for them rather.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I mean, I spent too much time in school on graphic design, right? And that was great. The Drexel program was awesome. What I do wish was a little different is that we had 3 web classes in which I was coding. Like I was learning web design, but also had to learn the languages, which is good because it gives you the experience, Avian, to your point, like to be able to speak to developers. But I sucked at it. It was very difficult for me to learn. Whereas I wish there was a little more focus on maybe the human computer interaction side, or maybe more specifically around UX. Fortunately at Drexel, I did have a 6-month paid internship, right? So that real world experience that you're talking about was great. But yeah, I agree with all that.
All right, I'll jump ahead to the next question that oh, there we go. Cool, thank you. How have advancements in technology and evolving user behaviors impacted your design and research process? I'll quickly give some insight, but I'll pass it off. So in our space at Vanguard, like previously we treated research as like a borrowed function. It was just like a team of consultants that you would pull in just at a project-based level. And we've sort of gone beyond that and embedded research into our team so that it's more a product ownership and part of the product experience. So we continue to use research because you can't just create a bunch of personas or behavioral attributes and say like these are our clients. Like it gets much more granular than that, right? So it's a good start, but it's the same way where I think like personas at the beginning of a North Star session are like a nice to have, but they get so stale over time and they don't let you to continue telling those stories and looking at really contextual day-to-day situations. So they're good to get started, just like a borrowed research group is good to get started, but I think you have to apply more tactics and meet more with people and understand the contextual needs that they have, and then get away from just those persona posters that are on a wall and talk to a lot more people and embed research into your process on a daily basis. I think it's the only way to have like more of a iterative kind of way that you lead your team. I'll pass it off to anyone else.
To kind of quickly piggyback off of your comment about research, like there are so many tools out there that make it easy for you to run very formal or very informal research processes, right? If you are a newer designer and you don't have research experience, it may sound too easy, but like, I don't know, create your own case study, right? And send out a Google form to people in your network. start getting some quantitative or qualitative research. Yeah, I think research has been huge, especially in quarantine, right? All of these virtual platforms like usertesting.com, Look Back, Maze, there's just so many tools at our disposal.
I agree with that. I really like that there are a lot of research tools. I think what's interesting about research tools, though, in the same way that could be dangerous with quantitative studies, is that if you become too reliant and you're not understanding how to ask the right questions, then it could lead you down the wrong path too. However, in saying that, I really like that teams are becoming more aware of research. As a consultant, I still find it really hard for people to understand because there's different variances of research too, right? Like we have your evaluative, which most people are used to, usability studies, but then companies don't know how to gather like exploratory studies. So like if you're starting with like a net new feature or a net new product, you don't know how to talk to customers other than evaluating a concept. There's different approaches you could take, and I think it's really important that like this product or tool is only really helping you capture the data. You still have to do a lot of thinking on how to make that data impactful for your customers or for your clients or for your teammates, however you want to define whoever you're working with. Technology, as always, can be great, or it could be like crippling to your process.
I think you can also be challenged by who your users are. So at Schneider, it's a B2B. We're talking about B2B versus B2C, which is much easier to perform that research. And not only is it B2B, but it's also very difficult to get access to our customers. So you're talking about a plant manager, a facility manager, a contractor on a job site. So it's very challenging. So you kind of have to be willing to be a little creative, and it might not be the ideal process that you wanted to do for running user research, but any user research is better than none at all, right? So go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was totally going to piggyback on that because I've worked with a company where I had to recruit for roofers. My God, yeah. It was so hard to yes, research is great. You should always be talking to your customers, but yeah, B2B can be really hard. Yeah. Recruiting for like doctors or lawyers. Like yeah. I almost feel like as to Frankie's point, it's creative problem solving, but you almost have to put on like a marketer hat or a salesperson hat to try and figure out, okay, how do I reach these people? How do I talk to them? How do I get their attention so that I can get them to talk to me? Yeah. So it's really interesting. Sorry.
No, I mean, I can remember early in my career, I did a user research study for Genzyme for a drug called Synvisc, which is a visco supplement that you put in your knee for orthopedic reasons. So I had to test with orthopedic doctors, and I actually went on site to the doctor's offices, and I would go into their office and they're like, I have 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes. And so it's just, you kind of have to be willing to adjust. You have to be willing to be flexible and adjust to what you can get for research.
100%.
I would say for me, this is an interesting question, considering I've only really been in the field since these technologies have been around, because I am just starting out or within the last year. So I think it's really interesting to kind of have these conversations that I've been having with some of my mentors or people who, have been in the field since it kind of began, quote unquote, and just hearing, how they used to do user research when none of these tools existed, to hearing how, how I've been, or comparing to how I've been doing it now. So I think it's really interesting, but I don't really have an answer to this question is where I'm going with this.
I think this question from Bex is really interesting. She would love to hear more about the essential pieces of the UX process you keep even under tight deadlines and budgets. And the way I'm analyzing that or interpreting it in my head is, because I'm research centric, there's even when there's no budget for research, or people are like, yeah, we know it's important, but like we can't talk to customers. I think we mentioned it last time, but look at Forrester reports, look at like free data that's out there, because there's always some kind of data to help back up your design decisions. So even if you can't have access to those customers, there's always something. You just have to Google it. And that's my tight deadline or budget. Like my minimum is I'll always have some kind of data to back up my decisions.
Yeah, I agree with that. I gave a much more long-winded and not precise answer in the chat, but any way that you can get that intelligence. I mean, we track Forrester and other ways. We try to understand like what is the client experience index sort of grade level that we want to shoot for, but you can always get tons of information and research studies. So I think there's tons of stuff that people just don't know is out there. You just have to get really scrappy and resourceful and find it if you can't actually go out and test with real people. So 100%.
Reddit is your friend.
Emerging trends and techniques. What should designers add to their tool belt in 2021? What practices should be left behind? It's a spicy one.
Let us tell you. Okay, some of you may be wondering, why is Beyonce on my screen, right? And the answer is because she is the most nominated woman in Grammy history. She is the first woman to win 6 Grammys in one night. 6? That's crazy. And her website, Beyonce.com, was sued for not having alt text for images or accessible dropdowns. Oof. The complaint about that, I mean, what better case to make to your company about being sued for something that seems simple from a design perspective, right? Adding alt text to images. But this is an example of accessibility being an afterthought, or perhaps not a thought at all. Something that gets me pretty fired up. As you can tell, my heart is racing, and it's not from the coffee. But yeah, so I think accessibility is going to be huge this year.
I agree.
It's not Beyonce. Sorry, go for it. Damn it.
Go for it. By all means.
No, you go for it.
All I was going to say is I totally agree with accessibility, and I hate saying that it's a trend because it definitely isn't. It's way more important than that. But I think it's unfortunately being kind of categorized as a trend, which I wanted to kind of bring up because they're two different things. A trend is something that comes and goes, and it's kind of design aesthetics usually, and something that a lot of people fall into. Where accessibility is, yes, could involve the aesthetics of the product, but it's way more than that. It's not just like the contrast of the fonts and the colors. It's way more. It goes a lot deeper, and it's something that is going to need to be changed moving forward constantly, and always need to be constantly improved with more and more technologies that are increased. And so I just wanted to throw that piece out there. I also had one other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of trends that are up and coming, but before doing that, does anyone want to talk more about accessibility?
I was just going to say that, or Beyonce. I was just going to say that I think you're right, Frank. It goes well beyond like color contrast and issues like that. I think accessibility within the development community needs to be something that we advocate for, to be like top of mind for any skill set. I see like upskilling happening, and it's great. And like I mentioned, the bolt-on and the remediation stuff, it's good. Usually I see clients do that after they've gotten sued. And maybe, like this case that we're looking at here, I think, how do we keep it at the forefront instead of an afterthought?
Yeah, I agree. But it comes back to that, the bringing up these cases to either your company or client depends on how important it actually is for you. I think, and I agree, Frankie, it's not a trend. I mean, I've been hearing this conversation for such a long time, but when it comes down to it, whether I'm working client, agency, consulting, like it's always at the back of their head. And I kind of equate it similar to research, right? Like if you're an early stage startup, most of the times you just want growth, right? You just want to build something, get the revenue in, and then you'll worry about it. You'll worry about research and finding out whether this is a validated product that people need. I feel like accessibility is the same thing, to Ted's point, like until you get sued, like you're kind of just like, well, we'll see how it goes, you know. But if we're advocating for users, like this should be part of our job too. It's because it is now like becoming the law, right? Like we are required to do it. And it also comes down to, you know, selfishly, like, what if we get sued one day? You know, there are now designers getting sued for decisions like, shit, I forgot what company it was, but I remember reading something where a designer got flagged for a decision that they made, but technically it wasn't them. It's always a team, right? But they got shat on for it. So it's just like, you kind of, like, whether we like it or not, like we are influencing behaviors. We could get sued for it. So we should be mindful of that too, right? Like, it's not just a company being sued. We are part of the problem too, if we're not advocating for it.
Yeah.
So.
And I should have prefaced this as well. I do not think that this is a trend, but it is. It's also on designers too. Like, there are different levels of education and knowledge around accessibility, right? So what I know about it may not be what Frankie knows, and vice versa. So just educating yourself. There are a ton of free resources out there around this topic.
Totally agree. I had something else to add and I totally just lost my train of thought there. But I think I'll jump in here with my other note that I wanted to add as well for another piece of, or another trend, I guess you could say. And this was, I would say, is more of a trend than accessibility was. And this is the fact of showing process and moving away from that kind of quote unquote pixel perfect notion. Yes, obviously, don't get me wrong. You know, when you hand things off to clients or to the company you're working at, you do want it to be pixel perfect at the final stages. You know, you want to always put your best foot forward. But at the same time, I think there should be, or there is starting to be, this push towards showing more of that process throughout, for lack of a better word, your actual process. Meaning, you know, on portfolios, not being afraid to show, you know, lo-fi, like low fidelity wireframes, not being afraid to show your sketches, and also just, you know, posting that generally, and also to like social and LinkedIn and things, and just showing, you know, how your brain works, how your process is, and really just kind of showing the steps in motion, rather than going to Behance and Dribble and only ever seeing these unaccessible, going back to that conversation, you know, UI designs that really don't ever think about the user. So I wanted to put that piece out there as well.
That's a great one. And I feel like there was a comment way back up in the chat around the difference of UX and UI, and how there are times where you think like, oh, well, my wireframes don't measure up to this highly polished UI solution. But honestly, if I interview a designer, if they don't show their process, if they don't show how they got there, like, it's not as meaningful to me. Like, I want to know that they're trying to solve a problem. And to be totally honest, like, we have problems with the job descriptions of UX design and UI design at times.
Yeah.
And what is what? And am I trying to solve problems through creating flows and leading users through them to see what is intuitive and insightful? Or am I just able to follow a design system, and I'm doing that pixel perfect type of work, Frankie, like you mentioned? Different skill sets, but I think this kind of the UX view of just trying to solve the problems, no matter how scrappy or ugly a wireframe is, I think that's so much more important and valuable to how we solve problems through design.
I totally agree with you on there being issues with job descriptions and how every company has a different name for the same job. I will leave that there before I go into a really long rant, because I easily can. But
go on a rant.
You want me to?
Yes, because someone here was asking about like, you know, job postings and asking for a master's. No, that's garbage. That just means they don't know what they're looking for. Exactly. Go on your rant.
They don't know what they're looking for. They expect to just say, by putting, you know, 5 to 7 years for a junior role, they're trying to just get, you know, the quote unquote ideal candidate who they think is going to be able to do everything and anything. In reality, those people don't really exist. Especially if you're a junior, you don't have that years of experience. That's why you're a junior. And so I always say, ignore those years of experience and still apply anyways, because realistically, if you check all the other boxes, you have a good shot. But it's this point of where my rant kind of starts, and I'll also end it, is I think it goes back to us as designers and how, it's on us to really define each of our roles being, what exactly is a UX designer? What's a UI designer? What's a product designer? What's a UX engineer? A UX this, a UX that? The list goes on. And I think it's the fact that because each and every one of us, not just the panelists here, everyone in the field kind of takes titles with a grain of salt to some extent, I think it then leads to confusion to these companies because they're not the ones who are physically doing UX. And so they're the ones who just kind of take it from what they're seeing. And, I think it's on us as designers to go in and say, look, like if you are this type of UX person, whatever, specifically within UX, what that means, then you're going to check all of these boxes below. If you're this other type of individual with this other title, you're going to always follow these ones. And I think as designers, it should be our responsibility to try and make some more consistency so that you don't start seeing these job descriptions that, a UX designer is also a product designer, because in reality, there are differences. I will stop my rant there because I see myself going on for a while here.
All right. Solid rant, Frankie. Solid rant. Do we want a lightning round? One last question. So we only got 10 minutes left for the case study. I'm happy to, I'll just pass it off to anyone who wants to quickly answer this question about the best advice they would give for designers.
I can start that one. So I think it's very important for you to try to find a mentor or somebody in your network who can advocate for you and sort of help you through the different parts of your career. For me, for my own career path, obviously I had it, there were ebbs and flows. I had children and I was, trying to figure out how to handle both of those at my career and starting a family. And so it became very important to have another female that I could work with and talk to and sort of help me get through those times in my life. So I really think that it's very important that you try to find a mentor in your field.
I agree 100% with that one. ADP List is a great place for that. I'm one of the mentors there. It's free mentorship. You just click onto someone's calendar and schedule a time with them for portfolio reviews, chats, whatever that is. So +1 to that. I would also say the biggest piece is getting your voice out there. So that means, writing content, starting a blog, a YouTube channel, whatever that is, and just sharing your opinions and your processes, like I was saying before, just to create a network. It's something that I've done now through LinkedIn, Instagram, and Clubhouse, and it really has helped me network. It even started my career, I joke, because LinkedIn recognized me for all my content as LinkedIn 2020 Top Voices in Design. So by all means, definitely, start putting content out there. I think it's a really big help.
Cool. Any other comments before we jump over to Nick's case study? All right.
Sweet. All right. And the standard question of 2020 and 2021 is, can you see my screen? Awesome. So yeah, we have 8 minutes. I talk fast naturally, so this should be pretty easy for me. So yeah, like I said, I'm a product designer at Inspire. I've been here for a little over 2 years. We are a clean energy technology company. Thank you for asking. Well, essentially, we're on a mission to transform the way consumers access clean energy to accelerate the world's transition to a net zero carbon future. In other words, we want to change the way people think about their energy usage, right? And we want to increase the percentage of renewable sources that make up the energy grid, essentially resulting in cleaner energy being distributed to homes. So you're welcome for clearing that up. This is our dope-ass design team. Shameless plug, we're hiring. So check out our careers page or feel free to reach out if you have any own questions. It's a bring your own memes environment. let's see, that talks about the team, so we can get into the work. So the challenge that we were facing was, how do we design a better utility experience? I'm sure each one of you in the audience has either been the owner of a utility account for your home or has had to rush a payment to your roommate because they've been bugging you for a week to pay your half so they can buy beer. But even if you've never had to call into your utility company because your bill is hundreds of dollars higher than you thought, I'm sure you can imagine that it's a less than ideal experience to have, right? And that tends to be the only time people think about their energy usage is when they're so shocked that they need to call in. That's actually good for us, and it helps us take a more user-centered approach to solving this. A little buzzword in there for you. So our solution to that is a virtual utility experience, or VUE for short. It's a full bill subscription product that aims to create a better utility experience. It integrates with your utility account, enabling you to pay the same price each month for your energy usage, while matching what you do use with clean energy. If you use 550 kilowatt hours in a month, we'll match that with clean energy. We want to help customers be more conscious and use less energy because, as we like to say, the cleanest form of energy is the energy that you don't use. So this is what I've been working on over the past year, a little over a year. So yeah, why did we create it? Before VUE, we were kind of limited to just operating in 18 states as an energy supplier, which meant that the only time people saw us was on their billing statement as a line item. And the only time they cared to communicate was if that line item was fluctuating, right? So we're solving that with a flat price. As designers, we love to add value to users, right? As I said before, we are balancing business goals with user needs. So we touch on a few different user needs with this product, reducing effort by incorporating auto pay with a credit card, providing access to personalized usage and insights, reducing anxiety with a flat monthly price, and affiliation and belonging to a collective of people fighting climate change. So here's a little bit of what it looks like. We love mock-ups. Everything looks better in a mock-up. As newer designers, write that down. It's awesome. So once you've signed up for Inspire, your dashboard sets up space to show you information about your usage as well as your impact on the environment. And we're really trying to tie that together, right? The more energy you use, technically the higher impact you have, but that's not a good thing, not impact in a good way. So yeah, there are many factors that go into the cost of your utility bill that are out of your control. Weather being a huge one, right? So say, for instance, someone had used a significant amount more that month than they thought they were going to. The last thing we want to do is shame them, right, for using more and make them feel bad. But instead, we want to understand why it happened and help educate them on why it happened. You can do all you want to use as little energy when it's freezing outside, but if you live near Rory in Boston, it's going to be very hard to keep your energy bill low in January or February because it is so freaking cold. So like all other products and services, it's a very iterative process, and we're still learning. I recently just finished up some moderated and unmoderated research, which validated our assumptions and also taught us some new things about what is important for customers and things that we should focus on. It was and is still important for us to think about how we can clearly articulate the relationship between energy usage and impact on the environment. But these are just some examples of the iterations of just one screen in the product, and that's our dashboard. So in one of our earliest iterations, you'll see we were trying to illustrate a lot of different pieces of information as well as numbers around usage and impact. All of that information in one card, doing research and honestly just looking at it, that's a lot to take in. We may understand it as designers at Inspire, but that doesn't mean anyone else understands it. So that led to the middle version, which was for our alpha release back in June. And continued research and learnings told us that there's still a lot of information to digest here, right? And it makes it feel slightly less like a dashboard, which brings me to the version on the right, which launched with our V1 release and is currently what we continue to gather insights around. So we have 1 minute. A big point of friction in our funnel to get people signed up for our paid product is that we need their utility credentials in order to get their historical usage, right? Since we are presenting them with a subscription offer, we take the average of however much usage they have in that apartment or home, and that's their monthly price. So the reason it results in friction is because Inspire is not really a big name brand, right? And it results in skepticism. So how do you reduce skepticism? Offer true value and transparency to users. We've called this idea the trust bank. I don't think that that is our owned term, but it makes sense, right? As a company, we have to deposit some value into the bank in order to build trust with audience and customers, especially when asking for sensitive information like utility credentials. So what you're seeing here is our solution to that, which is a free trial. If you aren't ready to commit to a paid product, we'll let you try it for 3 months and kind of understand the value of it and then make your decision. We are out of time, so we've done some quick work in smart home automations. I won't go too deep into that, but here's another sweet looking mock-up. And I started a design hang where we literally like get together in LA somewhere and we just hang out. So another shameless plug there. I'm so sorry. But yeah, that's it.
Now we gotta move to LA, everyone.
Yeah.
Come join us on the West Coast, please.
Sweet.
Get me out of
Sweet.
Boston.
All right. Well, that is everything for today. Thank you all so much for participating. This was a great panel. I loved hearing from all of you and getting all of your diverse, different input and backgrounds on one panel was so interesting. For all of you, we had so many great questions. We weren't able to get to all of them, so we can go ahead and continue that conversation. You can connect with our wonderful panelists, and you can also come and connect with Tech in Motion on our social media platforms. You can visit us on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and contact us there to at. And that's all we have for you guys today. So thank you for being here to our wonderful panelists, and thank you for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day. See ya.
Ciao.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.